Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, and I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool News. And I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Jamf Software. And it's titled, How to Successfully Scale Personalized Learning with iPads. Now, before I hand things over to Dave Saltmarsh, who's our speaker for today, I want to take just a few minutes to highlight a couple of items. First, we will be recording the event today, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. In a couple of days, we'll be sending out an email to you that will contain a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same link. And second, please do ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I think we'll have plenty of time at the end when Dave can address some of your questions. We also have a chat function which will be launched via the brown group chat icon down at the bottom of the screen. Use chat to talk among yourselves, to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or other concerns you may have. In fact, if you want to just try it out, why don't you just let us know where you're dialing in from so we can start a conversation. I do have one Dave to ask you, though. Please don't use the chat function to ask Dave questions. He will not have time to monitor the chat. If you have a question, again, please use the Q&A panel instead. And with that out of the way, let me turn to our speaker today, Dave Saltmarsh. He is the educational evangelist at Jamf Software, a career educator who for 18 years worked as a classroom teacher, IT and library director in Arizona and Maine. In addition to managing all facets of information technology, he has led implementations in one-to-one computers to students, handheld programs, and has focused on personalized learning. For the last 5 years, he's traveled globally and gained a worldwide perspective on the use of technology in schools and movement. Dave has a master's degree in instructional technology and on certified educational technology leader. Welcome, Dave. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you to eSchool News for the opportunity. The slide you're seeing may seem out of place. Trust me, this is not the end of the presentation, but I've convinced myself for this year to really focus on thanking people early and often in conversations. And as Andrew mentioned, I've been able to travel globally for the last 5 years since leaving my school department. And what I'm sharing with you today is really a compilation of all of the conversations I've had with different people within school organizations. So I want to thank them for having shared with me to allow me to pass this on. And absolutely, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day, either today or when you've watched this recorded version, because I recognize how much time is precious to people. I'm going to get specific in the discussion today around scale personalized learning under 3 elements. I'm going to share the vision that I've heard from those schools that I've interacted with, and it may or may not match your vision, but it is the vision that I've heard related to personalized learning, and it's evolved. It's evolved from the classroom of computer labs to the environment where we have devices ready and in students' hands right in the learning environment. The second aspect is certainly that it is achievable. Today, in 2016, we have the capabilities to streamline and make large-scale personalization down to the end user and student. And some people look at mass customization and they consider that a little bit of a contradiction, but we're really talking about being able to do this quickly and easily for individual students down to their devices, and we can, in fact, do that today. The third element is about leadership, and it really is what will it take to make this happen? And in the organizations I've been able to visit, these are the 3 key pieces that they've had front of mind. They've had the vision, they've recognized it's possible, and they've decided to go after that ability, and they've brought their teams together to make it happen. looking at the vision side of it and the digital classroom briefly, we recognize that schools, especially those that are implementing iPads, and it's not just schools using iPads, but other schools too, are trying to transform learning, change the way instruction is happening, how it's presented down to a student, make it be student-centered. Now, these aren't absolutely new, except that there's been challenges to making this happen in the classroom. Changing the role of the teacher is the goal of many organizations. It isn't to replace teachers, it's to become more than even a facilitator and that activator of learning. Doing that with a class of 15, 20, 25, or 30 or more students is challenging. Can we make it so that it can be done at that level is really the challenge that's been put forth to Jamf Software and other companies, Apple included, to help schools achieve that ability that certainly has been around for years at any time, anywhere, but any pace. Changing the structure of every student being on the same page or even in the same book at the same time within a classroom, or the same math activity at the same time. And the last part is that mass customized experience. Coming from a somewhat of assistive technology background and supporting special ed needs within schools, have recognized that individual learning plans are essential for all students of needs, special needs, but then regular ed and advanced students also. Can we make it so it's mass customized, and that the experience is really a key piece to all of this? Regardless of whether a school department or institution is looking at one-to-one or shared use, the possibility of customizing down to the individual student as closely as we can is absolutely there. The reasons people are trying to do this under this vision certainly are centered on that personalization. Absolutely, equity jumps out. Whether you're trying to get equitable access to all students across a grade level and share devices, or a school's gone with that one-to-one. It really is looking to how can we do things with limited resources, and the bigger aspect of this is teacher acceptance. Having been involved in education now 25-something years, and seen so many different initiatives come, other teachers have experienced that too. And while not everyone is enthusiastic as I am about using technology and the benefits to learning, after several attempts at different programs, they may be a little more reluctant. And meeting the teacher's needs in the challenges of digital or online learning is a key aspect to a vision that has led to some success. Now, I'm not, and I mentioned to start with, these are a lot of things that I've heard from other people that I've met. I would like to also point out there's a great book if you're interested in bringing this into your organization and learning a little bit more about mass customized learning and experience that is out there. Charles Swan and Beatrice McGarvey offer this book called Inevitable, and I guess I would take it like any other self-help or concept book. There are a lot of things you can take out of it and apply today. They have a larger theme that it should be done on a large scale and not piecemeal, but I think the concepts within it can help some people who might be at the beginning part of their journey at looking and wanting to foster a customized experience for students. I'm not going to get into some changes that are coming in, certainly not in detail in this presentation, but we are on the edge of some amazing things about to happen coming from Apple. And we are talking today about schools using iPads. And what I have seen over the many years working with Apple products, and especially over the last 6 years with iPads, is things continue to evolve. As Apple has evolved, products that come from like Jamf Software and the Casper Suite has evolved. And a lot of that is based on dialogue and discussions with schools of what their needs are. And certainly Apple is going to come out soon with a shared use model that might be more appropriate for the use cases that are going on. They're going to bring their own classroom version of a teacher console for some device management, similar to what Jamf has had for the last 3 years. In the Casper Suite, we've had Casper Focus that has tried to put some customized ability on the iPads that's right in the classroom into the hands of teachers. And they're certainly looking to bring about a unified console for a lot of the concepts I'm going to discuss today that at some level might be seen as more of a systems IT management capability. Same goes to that Apple ID creation and management. My point here is the mass customized experience that I'm going to explain today has the potential of getting even better in the next few months, certainly going into the next school year. And that's what I have seen over the last several years. It's gradual improvement. We always want to get better, and the great thing is we are seeing those happen very rapidly right now. And it comes down to that experience. The end user experience, has been Apple's trademark. Some people have said that's an issue. Personally, to me, making something very individualized and have that feel that it belongs to that end user and it's very personal is actually a great thing. And that experience is so often the joy of anyone. We see a lot of examples of people and their excitement of unwrapping and opening a box, especially of an Apple product. Apple likes to have that end user, actually take off the shrink wrap and have that experience of powering that device up. What I'm getting at today is that out-of-box experience can be had by a student or a teacher, an administrator in a school department with no touch, actually, by an IT department or an instructional technology person that's managing those devices. And the mass customized experience has several steps in it, and I'm not going to go into great detail into the 5 or so steps of managing devices, but I'd like to highlight 3 that can create this opportunity to get that out-of-the-box personalized experience to students. We need to be able to enroll devices. And in the past, we enrolled devices one at a time or a few at a time, hooked up to a computer. Today, we can do some things on the front end, and you literally can go into an Apple store and pick up the device that your school department purchased for you. They've done some things on the back end, and when you open that device out of a package, it's going to start up to the configuration that was decided by the organization. And that also lets us put profiles or settings onto the device down to the individual, and all this can be done remotely before the device is even taken out of the shrink wrap. And then content. It's really what we're wanting to get to. I've decided to entertain some discussions or dialogue that usually start out with, it's not about the device. And for years, we've tried to say technology is not supposed to be about the device. The dilemma is, if you can't get past the enrollment and the setups, and that's a very laborious task, it's really hard to get past that. Today, we can get it so that we can start talking about the content and the pedagogy and what students are doing with the devices, because we can simplify and get that startup to be not so much of a aspect of the technology plan. We have to consider it. We have to have things in place. But we can finally move on if we put these other aspects in behind the scenes. So I'm going to go into now a bit of how it's possible. I guess that's where I transitioned a few minutes ago into it is absolutely possible. You can get this experience for an end user down to an individual today. And this slide really goes through some of the things we can have happen to a device. I will get into the granular. I'll actually show a little bit of the technical side of how this can be done. I'm not going to get into too detail, but this is the overarching aspect. We can have a device start up right out of its cellophane and get Apple Assistant to begin and go through some things because Apple involved their DEP or Device Enrollment Program that can be preset on a device at purchase. So when the device boots up, you can have these kinds of things happen, like the home screen arrangement shows up. I'd like to go ahead and take you through this a little bit because I recognize not all of you are buying brand new devices tomorrow, and you're not expecting them to be unboxed and unwrapped and the things pulled off by a student. You've got devices out in carts right now. You have devices in students' hands right now. But the actual ability to actually start over from a simple pressing a reset button on a device is fully capable today. We could go in, have a user, and this could be any user, student, teacher, or a system admin. It doesn't take a technical person to go in and hit hard reset. The beauty of this is if this was actually done accidentally or accidentally on purpose, we're going to get the same result. This was an issue a few years ago. A student could possibly go in and just hard reset the device. Well, the great news is with stuff put on the back end, there's really nothing they're going to be able to do to prevent the device from starting up and getting the setup and the settings and configuration that the organization had chosen. They're not going to be able to bypass that. I should also mention that I talked about whether this is one-to-one or shared use. Now with Apple's ability to get a device up and running and apply settings, configurations to it without an Apple ID. So the terrific thing is we can have a device boot up, and in some cases, we can have certain things come up, like in this particular case you're seeing, I'm having the person choose a Wi-Fi. We could have had that, automatically put in, but in this particular case, this could have been a student at home. They're going to experience this. They put in their Wi-Fi. And because of that device enrollment program, basically they didn't even get an option to choose to enroll or not. It just automatically happened. And the Apple configuration aspect started going on. And this is, I will tell you that this is not a time-delayed video, so I'll probably have to pause for a few seconds. But if you can imagine the fact that an iPad is just starting up and it's going through the whole routine that a user that had bought it from Apple would have experienced. Now, a little bit of extra magic's going on in the background. They may not recognize it, and there's a little delay in me being able to show this. I'm still okay with it taking 2 minutes. Depending on how many apps you want to have pre-installed or install automatically, we can start having apps automatically coming down to the user's device without any interaction by them, especially since we don't have to have Apple IDs for deploying apps and configuring devices. We still want Apple IDs. I mean, it's great to have your backup. It's used for iTunes U. It has some great purposes, but it's just like any other system you would have IDs for. You don't have to have it for getting a device up and running. What you're noticing here is not only is the other app installing, but we've installed this portal called self-service. Self-service allows schools to really mass customize the devices because I'm going to go back one. Okay, this is where I told some people in the very beginning I'm sure with this online system and my nonlinear thinking, I was going to skip something. And certainly I did. I will come back to self-service and describe it for you with a visual, but primarily what you'll see in the next few things is I can decide what the student gets as far as apps and settings, and I'm going to show you our particular console for doing that. Now, there are some uniquenesses to Jamf software. We do some things perhaps others don't do. In general, these are basic concepts. Jamf software and the Casper Suite, we only focus on Apple products, so Apple computers and iPads. So we may do some things beyond what others do, and that's an important aspect because of where you are in your journey, depending on how many iPads you have, depending on how many individuals you want involved, how many people in your organization might purchase apps. Those are the kind of questions that might differentiate us. But in general, these are the kind of things you're able to do probably with another system also. For instance, and this is the part about customizing the device before a person opens the box or before they hit hard reset. An IT person might be listening in and go, okay, it doesn't just happen. You do have to do some things on the back end. And that's absolutely right. Apple has a portal for you to register the purchases that you're making on your iPad and assign it to a device management company like Jamf Software. And on the back end is what I'm doing right now. I'm showing you we're going to make this thing called a pre-stage enrollment. And when I do that, I can then say how I want the device to start up without ever touching it. So in this particular case, I know that I want the devices supervised. Several years ago, supervision was a function that you had to use through Apple Configurator. You hooked up the computers, and a lot of people had already, the iPads, deployed their iPads. And recollecting them to do this seemed like a lot of effort. At the time, there wasn't a lot of benefit to supervision, except for what we produced, which was Casper Focus, which 3 years ago, giving teachers the ability to manage the devices, pause them, send them to a website, put them to a secure app for testing. It was important to me, but it might not have been important enough to someone to take the time to do this. Now you can do supervision ahead of time, so when the device first boots up, it happens. You also have the ability to decide that MDM profile is mandatory and can't be removed. Well, hear me now and believe me later, that's pretty significant. Now we can make it so the student can't go in, delete all the profiles, and just use the device as they like. It also is a huge deterrent. It's just like those of you who have your own personal device. It's no use to a person to steal my iPad or my iPhone because they're not going to get past the startup. Same thing with your student iPads. It's actually a pretty good deterrent to announce to the world that your iPads have this setting on them, and it pretty much become a brick or a nice pretty glass, piece of glass if you were to steal it because of this. The other thing we can do with this pre-stage enrollment that is pretty nice is we can choose to eliminate all of those wonderful things you see when you first start up a device. For instance, we don't need enter your Apple ID show up if you're using device-based. We may want to skip some of the things like, do you want to use Siri? Do you want to use Touch ID? We certainly probably want to skip, do you want to set up Apple Pay? Now, the great thing is if you want to enable these things, people can always go back. But mostly what I'm saying is we can streamline that startup experience for an end user. You can make it as normal, or you can remove some things if you choose. The other aspect is those were the basic settings, the basic setups. Now, what's great about in our application, Jamf Software's Casper Suite, is you can create a whole bunch of enrollment profiles. You might have one for an elementary school. You might have one for teachers. You may even have one for a very specific cart in the library, whereas the other carts have a different enrollment profile. And without getting into too much detail to why, you might imagine that you just want some capabilities at startup with one set of devices different than the others. And this is where we can really do some customization, is when we get into the profile settings. I'm going to mention this up front and try to remind myself to say it again later. We can do these profiles initially, but the great thing about profiles, we can do them on the fly later with never touching that device. So in this particular case, at startup, I might want to go in and set up some restrictions, preset the Wi-Fi, maybe preset up the email systems and things like that. One of the great things that people want to do is what kind of passcode do you want to require on the device? For K5 carts, you might want a simple 4-digit passcode. For older students, you might want a 6-digit passcode. You might want a very complicated, complex passcode for certain users. We can also set that when a device goes to sleep, those kind of things. So I want you to recognize there are so many profiles that we could choose from. And yes, I expect you to be sitting back saying, oh my gosh, how are you expect us to read that? Thank you for getting my point. There are so many different profiles. If I jump ahead and hone in on some of the maybe educational or classroom profiles to consider, the other ones you could consider doing up front. But when we look at a classroom or what schools might want, do you want a certain student or group of students to have the camera? What about FaceTime? Well, the other big thing that schools often deliberate between, should we allow kids to install apps? Well, the thing is, they do this a lot on an all or nothing policy. So we can do that up front. We can do an all or nothing policy if we want to, but how about grade levels or thinking about doing that down to the individual? So I'll come back to this. Maybe we don't allow App Store ability, or removing apps, or changing the name of the iPad. That's when self-service can come in play, because you can use our self-service, which I'll show you in a few minutes, for putting apps you want kids to get, even though they don't have access to the App Store. So let me take this a little bit further. We can go into a system, and we can set up these configuration profiles. I look at them more as settings, but they're configuration profiles. I mentioned the restrictions and the fact about the passcodes. I probably got a little bit ahead of myself. And the other one to consider is that activation lock. For younger students, you may want to set that. We really want to consider privacy for the individuals. And students learn, but we want to have them learn in a safe environment. You know, gradually adding more abilities, teaching them about appropriate use, digital citizenship plans. So you might want to choose that certain students, their device goes to sleep after 2 minutes. That's going to protect their device from another student getting on it. At the same time, you might want to adjust that depending on the user's needs. We keep going into this, into a few of the other capabilities that we have. And you'll notice here, I've got the concept of disallowing the camera. That's how easy it is. Well, what I'd like to mention is I could be doing this to a group of students and modifying these restrictions. The thing is, I can also create groups with these restrictions that I can then move students in and out of. So imagine, and being a former librarian, and I manage the technology and library services for 3 school departments, so in my mind it was just a natural thing. My librarians could actually get an email from a teacher saying, you know, Jimmy's been misbehaving in class, please add him to that group that doesn't have camera. And then a couple weeks later, instead of emailing IT, they're like to the librarian or whoever was designated, please take Jimmy out of that group. That's how we can start using these restrictions. I'll pause here for a second and realize I'd like to have mentioned one other thing. We have this great restriction for website ability. We can limit a student to a group of websites. So I could create a group that can only go to these 20 websites or 15 websites. And if a student has lost a privilege, they could be moved in or out of that group. And in the same class of other 4th graders that had full access, except for the filtering system that we have in place, this one particular student could only go to these 15 websites. And no other student actually even needs to know that. And I could move them in and out. And it's actually relatively easy once you set up the configuration groups, and you can then move students or their devices in and out. Of course, it's really great to stop talking about the technology and get past all that and start talking about the apps. And that's really where we can get to mass customized experience. Being able to deploy an app to a group of students on the fly without collecting the devices. The thing is, today, when we talk about these apps, we can actually get to the point of doing that down to an individual student. I'm not going to go through the process. I have other videos on our site of actually going and getting apps to the VPP program or Apple Volume Purchase Program. But really what I want to show you is that we can choose to scope this down to a device, and we can either have it show up automatically, which if you asked me a year or so ago, I would have said I couldn't do this. And this is that continual evolution of mass customized experience. Now I can actually have an app show up on a student's screen, desktop, or home screen on their iPad. I can also choose to just put it in self-service. And the great thing is I can choose to deploy or scope that down to either groups of students or individuals. And I touched on it before. I will mention that we can actually now do it just down to a device. So if you've got shared devices and you want it to go down to a cart or set of 6, you don't have to have a student to assign it to. I can assign it down to that individual student. And that's a significant enhancement over the last few years. And I'm just going to get through this. This is that part of now with the volume purchase program, we can actually go ahead and assign that down to a device. So apps to shared devices, that's the critical piece that people want to use. I'm going to change gears a little bit, although we're still talking about apps and personalization. I just showed you the capabilities that through a system like the Casper Suite, you can, next week, I want these students to have this app. Unfortunately, this app might be an app that costs $15 and I only have 30 seats of it. The great thing is, 2 weeks later when you're done with that project or done with that unit, somebody in our system simply goes and removes that group of kids from the scope, and that app could be applied to another group of students. So that's a really great use of a product like ours or device management. And again, we can save on licenses because I don't have to buy a seat for every student. And I can move apps around depending upon who needs them at a given time. Now, I'm going to suggest that that doesn't have to be an IT person's function. It could be a librarian's function. It could be an instructional technologies function. However, that still doesn't really meet the needs of the classroom teacher with Susan needs this app today because she is showing that she's ready to move on, or she needs some reteaching. So we've collaborated with this company called eSpark. And eSpark has hundreds of educators in their employment that is going out and finding apps and aligning them to content so that a classroom teacher doesn't have to go recognize that a student that needs 3-digit multiplication practice, go find that app and email IT. Because we've integrated with eSpark, the student, either from imported assessments, is identified that they need to be working on certain content or skills. Through an assessment right inside of eSpark, it can also narrow down what a student might be needing to work on. With collaboration of the teacher of assigning goals, then their system is able to say, okay, based on that goal, automatically, the student should be using these 4 apps. Their system talks to Casper Suite, and we're able then to deploy those apps down to that student's iPad without any physical interaction or technical interaction by the teacher, an IT person, or a librarian. Those apps just automatically start coming down to the students. Imagine a student a week or so later has now progressed. They take an assessment, and it determines they no longer need that app. They need some different apps. And automatically through the system, eSpark talks to the Casper Suite. The apps are retrieved, and the student gets additional apps. And the great part of that is apps are now available for another student. So when I talk about the evolution of mass customized experience, we aren't perfect today. We're still trying to make it easier for a non-IT person to come into our system and do some things, but we're progressing. And the collaboration between Apple, Casper Suite, and organizations is going to make that better. Quick little bit about self-service. It's something we've had that I think for years has been one of those kind of things that supports personalized learning. Let's say you want to block the App Store, but you can actually do a push notification down to students saying you have a new ebook available to you. You have a new app available to you. And this can be down to groups of students or, again, down to the individual student. And regardless of whether you block them from going to the App Store. And with Apple Volume Purchase and device-based VPP, we can make these apps be able to get installed on the students' devices very straightforwardly. Basically, it is that portal to your own customized app store. But beyond that, you can actually have settings. Imagine walking into a building as an administrator and getting the printers to show up because you came into that building, or a new configuration profile because a new Wi-Fi network has been put in place. So there's some great ability to interact with the user that some people may not even recognize is already on their iPads if you're using the Casper Suite. So we want to enable the end users. And we certainly have more information. We've done some that through eSchool News before, but we also have some on our own site. If you really wanted to see more about that, The last piece that I wanted to get into here is all of this requires leadership. And leadership is really about change, helping an organization change perhaps a model that they had in the past where they weren't very collaborative between IT organization and the curriculum or the instruction. And we're really trying to foster this notion that it's going to require the collaboration of many groups within an organization to support all of the students. So the teachers, the administration, they know the needs of the individual students. It takes collaboration between the special ed teacher and the classroom teacher back to whoever is managing the abilities. So we're really trying to promote this idea of transforming IT practices. So Casper Suite does that. Jamf Software does that. Apple's does that on the device end. They also transform the user experience with the affordances, the touch ability of the iPad. Being able to distribute things individually to a student, turn off the camera for a student for the next couple days and then turn it back on. These are the things that we're hoping that we're fostering here and that the schools we've been working with are really trying to do. It absolutely takes leadership in bringing the systems IT and instructional together. We believe that we can help in this, that centralized IT to free them up. And it's really about putting tools right in the hands of the user that 15 or 20 years ago, before they were digital, those people had that ability. As a librarian, I know that instructional technology started in libraries in the 60s. It only evolved to when I was a teacher in the early 90s to technology becoming so sophisticated and complex, managing licenses, things like that. That's when I stepped out of the classroom to help out. We're trying to bring some things back. Let the systems IT focus on the more complicated things. And we think that the mass customized ability is right on the cusp of being able to do that as long as we start coming together early on in that system. I will mention at the very end Casper Focus. I'm not going to get into this. Again, we have webinars and things on this. But it was our first iteration of taking our tools out of the IT person's hands and into the teacher 3 years ago. And we're thrilled that Apple is coming out with their version, and I don't want to say it's their version, but the same kind of concept, and they can take it so much further with having abilities that are relying upon the device and things that they can do. I'm really excited to see that. And then where do we go with this as possibly a companion supporting that teacher's needs? But I just want you to recognize that there are a lot of tools out there to make this all happen. And if you're interested, don't take my word for it. Jump on our Jamf Nation where we have 25,000 users, mostly IT, but a lot of instructional and instructionally minded technology, and ask them how they're doing it, how they're being able to do this mass customized ability. This is where I've gotten my information from, and I highly suggest that you consider. You don't have to be a customer of the Casper Suite. You don't even have to be planning to buy the Casper Suite to be talking to people about what they're doing and how they've brought their instructional and their systems IT together. How have they bridged that gap to make this happen? If you feel like if you're on one side or the other and it's difficult to do, ask them how they've done it. And I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to let the people on the other end know that Safari just unexpectedly crashed on me. So I'd like you to go ahead and take over the slides, please.
All right. Dave, do you want me just to, I'm going to move you, at the moment I have you on the slide which has got the contact us information on it. Would you like me to move us on to the final Q&A slide? Thank you.
You know what, and surprisingly, and I have to say, I'm thrilled how quickly the Safari came right back up to the page. So that's really that. I didn't go into detail in this. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty. Jamf is going to be doing some things on how to bring the groups together because and it starts with both wanting to. But yes, please, Andrew, please go on to the question and answer, and I'm ready to just move on to that.
Okay. All right. Terrific.
And let me stop and say, again, thank you, everybody, because, when you're trying to present something like this without an audience nodding and without that interaction, I hope I gave you what you're looking for, and I'd love to hear some of your questions and comments, and we can always check in with each other offline. Thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Dave. That was extremely interesting and very informative. Before we turn to the questions, I do want to apologize to there are a few people in the audience who did experience some sound issues during the presentation, hearing music, which is fine if you're learning how to salsa dance, maybe not so good for learning about customized instruction. Just to let everyone know, though, that if you couldn't hear, if there are any issues with your sound, the recording and the recording will be available tomorrow, and it will not have any of those issues or music in the background if you've missed areas that you want to come back and explore. So on that, let's turn to some of the questions. And Dave, why don't we just start with a question sort of, explaining what is the Apple Volume Purchase Program, and can you give any idea what that does in terms of pricing for iPads?
Sure. Remember when I was doing iPod Touches since 2008 and having to go buy apps and figure out how do I go buy groups of apps and get them out to students? What Apple has put in several years ago, and as long as you're in the 26 countries that support the Volume Purchase Program, schools are able to go in and buy apps in bulk. Now, there's a couple advantages to that. I would say 99% of the apps that you can go into on the App Store that use the Volume Purchase Program, and this is a portal that a school department goes into, most apps offer a 50% discount if you buy 20 or more. So that's a big reason to use it. The other reason to use it is for implementing your distribution of your apps. Buying them through this program and getting them into a management system like the Casper Suite allows you, and the new way you can purchase apps, to distribute them and then pull them back. Let's say I have a group of ninth graders that I give an app to for algebra, and when they leave, years ago, there was nothing I could do. That app walked with them, and I'd have to buy more. The Volume Purchase Program allows us, under the managed app ability, to retain the ownership for the organization. So two crucial things: discount, probably, and the third element, and I appreciate it being asked, the Jamf software allows you, and keep in mind, I had special ed buying software, I had math departments, the middle school, the high school. Jamf software allows you to have multiple organizations with their own volume purchase program. And I don't want to get technical here, but imagine only having one and the IT person having to be the only one who could buy apps, and their money had to go to them. So what's important with the Volume Purchase Program, can you, like the Casper Suite, have an individual element in an organization have their own? And with the Casper Suite, you can. And I appreciate being able to share that little bit of, there's a thing you need to know when you're looking at your device management capability. Andrew, go ahead. I'm sorry if I kept going on too much.
No, that's terrific. Someone else in the audience who I assume who has a school probably that has older iPads wanted to know about the software that allows the mass customization. Can it be used with older model iPads, or is there a cutoff point for which software version it works with?
So great. So currently, everything that I said as of today is available. I believe there are some things with the Casper Focus. You had to have the iPad 1, the original iPad. There may be, I would have to qualify it, that one, going, there might be a few things because of the iOS capability. So basically, from what I've said today, as long as the device can handle the latest OS from Apple, then we can do everything I just said. Now, I'm going to state that Apple is coming out with some new capabilities that I mentioned were in 9.3. I cannot speak to those and the devices that will be able to be used for those. But everything I showed today, that is absolutely possible. I think maybe all the way down to the iPad 1, and I'm not even sure that can't be. So I think I would safely say you're covered, but but don't know about Apple's new stuff.
Yeah. All right, great. And as schools and districts look at implementing a solution like this, can you talk about what their options are for the licensing of the product? Is it district-wide? Is it on a per-student basis? How does that all work?
Oh, sure. With the Casper Suite is a per device annual, and my brain have to stop because we double the cost for commercial, but for education, you only pay a per device, and it really depends on how many devices you have, and you get the support, ongoing maintenance and things like that. And I try to stay out of the sales side, but it starts at about $9 per device per year for the Casper Suite, and it goes down the more iPads you have. But it is annual, right now it's an annual per device, and keep it as simple as that for me. And we call it a suite. By the way, I would clarify, ours is a suite and it comes with it. We don't charge extra for, like, if you wanted Casper Focus, that teacher, so that's part of the package. So I want to clarify that aspect, I think, more than anything. There's no hidden what about this stuff. Okay.
And you talked a bit about how there have been some improvements over the past years, particularly on assigning capabilities to students. For schools that have the software already in place, are these software improvements uploaded automatically, and does that come with support? How is that all arranged?
So, very good question. First of all, it does come with support. The primary thing you're buying from Jamf is support. And your technical account person is actually a named human being that knows your school, and that's a really great thing. The dilemma is it's sort of up to who's managing your devices. To take advantage when new things come out, you often have to update the devices to the latest Apple operating system, and that can actually all be done through our system. And you also have to choose to update our system. So I have some good friends in a school department that unfortunately their IT has not updated something, and so there's one feature in Casper Focus they really want, and so it's back to that collaboration. IT, for whatever reason, hasn't upgraded to our latest version, and the teachers didn't get it. So I want to say it's available to you, and there is never any extra cost for doing it, but it does require. We do have some schools that have cloud-hosted instances, and then that's terrific. If you've got a cloud-hosted, you're going to get the latest version. There's nothing you have to do much on your end, and you're going to get those abilities. It's when they host it internally, sometimes for whatever reason, and there's good reasons at times, schools haven't upgraded to the latest. So I would say that would be your only reason why you don't have an ability.
Okay. All right, great. I just wanted to come back to, I know in the last question you clarified that it was on the pricing was on a per device basis, and someone from the audience just wanted to clarify. So even if they have 13 iPads, for instance, but those iPads are used by many more than 13 students, the number of students is not part of the calculation. Is that correct? Absolutely, it's not. It is not. From the Casper Suite Jamf software, it's about the number of devices you have. If you're sharing 30 devices between 200 students, it's still only being managed 30 devices. Okay, great. And let me turn to one other question, and I'm not sure I understand exactly where the question is, so I'm going to try and intuit where it's going. Is it possible, when you want to change the settings in an iPad, change which apps are uploaded and so on, do you have to take control of the iPad to do that, or can it be remotely pushed to the iPad and done automatically regardless of where the student is or where they have it? Can it be a remote automatic change?
Short answer is absolutely yes. If I had devices here, I would show you. I click a button in the back end of the system, and a student's iPad seconds later, you would see all of a sudden the camera icon would just disappear. They just have to have internet access. It doesn't matter if they're on a student network or their home network. You can make it, basically they just have to have internet access, and that checkbox that is done instantly, or when I say instantly, I consider within 2 or 3 or 5 seconds, pretty much instantly, that kind of thing can take effect.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And someone else wants to know, as I'm sure most educators do, are there any grants or programs that you know about that would allow people to obtain new iPads? Anything specific out there that you would push them to?
Well, I absolutely wish I had an answer for that. It's outside of the realm, really, of where I'm working. When I was in the school, I was responsible for that kind of stuff. We know a lot of people have applied anything from funds that they can get for professional development for teachers because of the classroom app. They consider that a teaching tool. So maybe it's about, rather than saying here's a specific grant, there's some uniquenesses people have utilized. Certainly, I use Title I funds to get students their devices, and when I train teachers, part of that element always included some kind of training. So I guess, unfortunately, I don't have a specific thing to go buy iPads, but certainly there's some unique ways to make sure the funding you already have could be applied towards it.
Okay, great. All right, and let me turn to another topic altogether, which is what advice or suggestions do you have if a school is struggling to bring IT and their instructional needs together? Do you have any words of advice on that?
I do realize that I threw that out as a major component of what we've recognized successful schools, and what I mean by successful is not just in their first 3 months, but a year or two later. These were the elements that we saw. And absolutely, it's a challenge. It's on the top agendas of several conferences this year. The Council of Great City Schools is bringing actually the CTO and the Chief Academic Officer together at their same meeting. COSIN would be where I would point people to, the Consortium of School Networking. The alphabet I had next to my name, that certified educational technology leader, basically they have training to help the IT person that's coming from a systems background to understand education. They have training to provide the superintendent or the curriculum person understanding of technology. And their certification basically encompasses both sides. And so, I think that's a place where organizations should be looking. If their leadership, I'm just going to put it out there, should have a balanced understanding to begin with, and I would point people towards their resources. But it really starts with, does the highest level leadership have the vision and the desire to?
Okay, great. All right. Now, we have several questions from the audience that are quite technical and specific to their own implementations, in which where they need some troubleshooting done. And I don't think that probably we should walk through those right now. And all I would say to those people who have given us any questions about specific troubleshooting issues with their systems, we will have someone from JAMF will contact you directly to get you some answers to those questions. But I don't think we should probably take up all the audience's time going through those specific and very, very specific questions. So that is actually, we're probably going to draw to a close there. I just want to thank Dave Saltmarsh again for an excellent presentation, and I would like to thank JAMF for its support. And once again, if we didn't answer your question because of its very technical nature, someone will follow up with you directly. Further, for those who had any issues with the volume on the sound, I just want to remind everyone we're going to be sending out an email to all the attendees when a clean recording of the webinar is ready, and you'll be able to get a clean copy and download the presentation at that point as well. So that brings us to an end for today. Thank you again so much for attending, and this concludes today's webcast. Thank you so much. Bye.